Now, now we're going to actually learn about viruses, so let's go ahead and learn about them. And I promise not to bring up coronavirus too much, but obviously that's extremely relevant, so it might be in here. Okay, so what is a virus? So you probably have seen this and this before, but viruses can also look like that. They come in many different shapes and sizes and whatnot, okay? But a virus is literally just a non-living strand of genetic material, so either DNA or RNA, that is surrounded by a protein coat. Viruses are so interesting to us because they cause disease. Okay, viruses are very microscopic. So if I have the tip of my pen right here, more than 10,000 of the common cold virus can fit on the tip of this pencil. Okay, viruses are extremely small. They can only be really seen most of the time with an electron microscope. So not even like the regular light microscopes that we use in schools. No, they have to be seen with an electron microscope, which are very expensive and whatnot. They see things that are extremely small. Okay, so a lot of people are like, well, if viruses, do what they do, like, why aren't they considered to be alive? Well, there's many reasons why, and here are the main reasons. Like, first of all, it doesn't exhibit the characteristics of life. So it's not made up of cells. It has no organelles. It cannot make its own proteins. It cannot move on its own, and it cannot replicate itself without a host. Viruses also do not grow. They can kind of use energy sometimes, but barely, and whatnot. So viruses are not considered to be alive because they don't exhibit the characteristics of life. They aren't living in the way that bacteria, plants, animals, fungi, protists, and archaea are. Okay? So yeah, viruses are not living because they don't exhibit the characteristics of life. So viral parts, so the parts of a virus. So there's a bunch of different parts, but the main ones that you're going to need to know are these two. You need to know what the capsid is. So the capsid is exactly kind of what it sounds like. It's a cap for the virus. So it is an outer protective layer, and it is made up of protein. So it's a protein coat that surrounds the virus and protects it. Okay. The other part of the virus is the nucleic acid. So nucleic acids are just going to be genetic materials. So either DNA or RNA. And essentially, we already know that DNA is like the recipe for something because it's red and then it creates, we'll talk about how exactly that happens. But yeah, it's the recipe for building new viruses. So again, the capsid surrounds the nucleic acid, which is also sometimes known as the genome. DNA, RNA all mean the same thing. Okay, so do viruses contain DNA? Yes. Yes. A virus is literally 50% of the virus is just the DNA and RNA that's surrounded by a protein coat. Okay, so the way that they work is that they have this genetic material that they use to hijack or take over host cells. So for example, coronavirus can take over a human cell, and it forces the host cell to use viral DNA instead of the host DNA. So if that cell is now making viral DNA, it's using viral DNA, then that means that it's going to start making viral parts, which means that virus is going to then take over that cell, essentially. Okay, so bacteria have a plasma membrane. Remember that? It has that plasma membrane that's selectively permeable, allows some things in and other things not in, with nucleic acid. While the virus has the nucleic acid, but it's surrounded by a capsid, which is just a protein coat. Okay, so again, where's their DNA? Where with prokaryotes, DNA is found in the free floating in the cytoplasm, and in eukaryotes, DNA is found in the nucleus. Viruses don't have a cytoplasm or a nucleus because they're not cells. So their DNA is just freely floating inside of their capsule and is protected by that protein coat. Okay, so how exactly do viruses infect and reproduce? This is kind of the number one thing. Well, okay, so let's say there's a virus and you get into contact with it. The virus is going to enter the host cell. Okay, once it enters the host cell, it's going to walk around, float around in the cytoplasm until it finds the nucleus. Then it's going to find a way to enter the nucleus. Okay, once it enters the nucleus, it's going to take over the protein factory. And instead of the host cell using its own DNA to continue making cellular parts and doing cellular jobs, the viral DNA is going to take over. So that means that now this host cell is going to start pumping out viral parts. Okay? It's going to pump out those viral parts all the way up until the cell is so full that it just bursts. And of course, we know that that causes sickness and maybe even death in some cases. So that's how viruses infect and reproduce. They basically hijack, which means to take over something, and they force it to use they force the host cell to use viral DNA instead. Okay, so how has COVID-19 spread so rapidly? Well, there's a video on it, which is going to be on your worksheet, so I'm not going to play it right now because you'll play it as part of your worksheet. But just really quick, essentially exponential growth. So one person can infect 2 people, and then each of those people can each infect 2 people, and then each of those people can each infect 2 people, and then it just doubles and doubles. And this can all happen theoretically in one day, maybe even in 1 hour. Okay, so it's called exponential growth. If you learned about exponents in your class, your math class, then you know what I'm talking about, how the exponential growth is just, boop, just goes crazy. So the number one question that makes me so angry is, are bacteria and viruses the same thing? No, they are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. Bacteria are literally alive. Viruses are literally not alive. Bacteria have a cell membrane. Viruses do not have a cell membrane because they are not cells. Yeah, the only thing that they really have in common is that they can cause disease. They don't always cause disease. And they have DNA. So they are not the same thing. Okay? There actually are these things that are called bacteriophages. They're a type of virus that infect bacteria. Okay? They're a type of virus. These are bacteriophages that they infect bacteria. Okay, so viruses and bacteria are not friends. Like, they're not friends. They're not cool. They have beef. Okay, viruses are non-living. They have no cells. Bacteria are living and they're mostly unicellular, or they're all unicellular. Bacteria reproduce by splitting into 2 identical cells, while viruses reproduce by invading a host and hijacking or taking over their protein factory. Viruses are very, 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 very small. Remember, 10,000 on the tip of a pin. While bacteria are just pretty small. You usually see them with a regular microscope. Okay, bacteria are killed using antibiotics, while viruses can be prevented using vaccines or can be treated using antivirals. Okay, so this also is the main thing that people are confused on. Vaccinations and antibiotics, which I think I have. Yeah, there we go. So how exactly do vaccines work? So vaccines work by scientists spend however long they have to spend to basically weaken a virus. Okay, so a dead or a weakened version of a virus is given to someone using a vaccine. So boop, boop. That means now you have like a dead or a weakened version of the virus. This small scale virus infection, so it's very small scale, raises the body's alarm. So your immune system is like, oh my God, like what's going on? It's figuring out how to work around that virus. It's going to produce some antibodies, and it's basically just going to be like, okay. So this is essentially like a scrimmage, okay? This is like a scrimmage where you guys are playing, but it's not that serious, okay? That way, let's say if the body actually encounters the real deal, full scale, like not weakened, not killed, not in a vaccine, they just come out in the world, they touch something and they get the virus, then the body already knows what to do because it's already seen, it's already scrimmaged, right? It's already practiced, so it already knows what it needs to do so that it can fight for the body's health. Okay? So that's how vaccines work. So another thing that I want to talk about since we're here is about misinformation. So there's a lot of misinformation out there regarding the coronavirus and a lot of things. And so I just want to make sure that all of my students are able to identify misinformation and whatnot. So you're going to read and respond to some questions about that. I'm not going to show the video because you will watch it in your stuff. So how to spot fake news? Well, of course, you're going to want to do all of these things by considering the source. Are they actually even legitimate, or is this a random account that's actually probably a bot, a robot? Is it a joke? If it's, super out there, it might be satire, which means it might be a joke. You want to make sure that you want to check your biases. Okay, put yourself in whatever shoes that you need to make sure that you check your biases. And of course, always ask the experts. Ask the experts, whether that's asking a librarian, asking myself, consulting a fact-checking site. You want to make sure that you are just being intelligent, because it's really sad that misinformation is so rampant that even people who are in positions of power are even spreading misinformation and like saying things that are like clearly not true and haven't been true. And it actually causes, harm to people. So for example, there was this man who drank cleaner after redacted, I'm not going to say his name, floated dangerous disinfectant remedy. So someone actually drank cleaner because someone in a position of power told them this was okay. So you just want to always make sure that you're not a sheep. You want to make sure that you are learning and understanding information for yourself, because you don't want to be one of those people who out there who thinks that they're correct and they're totally wrong. And it's actually kind of embarrassing how wrong they are. Okay, so let's just recap this lesson really quick by organizing life. Okay, so we have all these words. I'm going to place them into this concept map. So blank can perform all the blank, but that might not include what. So all organisms can perform all the what? 9 characteristics of life. However, all organisms might not include viruses, right? Because viruses are not living organisms. They're non-living, okay? Viruses are not considered living because they're not composed of cells. Good. Okay, now we're going to do this next part. Cells, which can be of the following type. So there's 2 types of cells. What are those 2 types? Prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Okay. Okay, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, or prokaryotes do not contain, while eukaryotes do contain what? The nucleus. And what? Membrane-bound organelles. Exactly. Okay, so now we're going to list the 2 types of prokaryotes and the 4 types of eukaryotes. So prokaryotes is bacteria, and they're all unicellular. There's also archaea. Eukaryotes, which includes fungi, protists, plants, and animals. Okay, so that was just a little recap of today's lesson. Go ahead and finish up your worksheet.